Hi, my name is Neil Blevins, and this tutorial is called The Big Shapes, Designing the Alien Mothership, where I'm going to be discussing the early design process for the alien mothership from the project Inc. that I'm working on. So as you probably already know, when you're designing something, whether it be a spaceship or an alien or a robot or whatever, you want it to have a really strong silhouette. And if you're doing a project for still images or a book or something, you can sometimes get away with a slightly more detailed silhouette because the audience might be looking at it for a long period of time. But when you're designing for film, you tend to want to err on the side of a little bit simpler. And that's because you might only see the object in a shot for a second or two, and within that really brief period of time, you need to be able to immediately identify what it is you're looking at. So even though Ink is a book at this point, we're treating it like a film project. So for Ink, we want to design our stuff as though this were a film. And my buddy Bill Zahn, who's one of the collaborators on the project, he has all these film design rules that he likes to live by. And he takes this one step further. And it's not just about having a simple, strong silhouette, but you need to be able to describe what the thing looks like in one sentence. So, for example, let's take Star Wars. So in Star Wars, if you had to describe some of the designs, you would say, well, the TIE Fighter is a flying H, or the Millennium Falcon is a plate with a chunk cut out of the front, or the Death Star, great example, is just a sphere with a crater in it. So very, very, very simple, iconic shapes. Now, I'm sure you've all seen cases where the design hasn't worked in a film, like if you see this monster and the monster, you're trying to describe it and it's like, okay, well that has tentacles and spikes and it kind of like folds out and it's got 400 limbs, and you have a lot of trouble describing really simply what it is that you saw. And we're trying to avoid that in this project. We want stuff that's far more simple and iconic. So for Ink the robot himself, he's basically just a trash can with arms and legs. And the Citadel is a big three-sided block. And you can see here all the silhouettes for the mothership, and the one we ended up going with was this one here. And so if you had to describe this simply, you'd probably say it's like a ring or a donut with these big spokes sticking out of the top and bottom. Here's another view here. And then here's a more detailed one showing some of the greebles and nernies and things. And you can see, even though there's tons of detail here, the overall shape is still very, very simple and straightforward. And I should also mention here that from a shape language perspective, we pretty much have two things going on. We have this ring shape, and then we also have this triangular shape down here. And the triangular shape is similar to the top shape of the Citadel. In fact, you can see these are all citadels inside this giant ship, inside the triangular part. And then the ring is sort of similar to a motif that appears on the alien itself. And that's just something that's sort of nice to do if you want to gel everything together from a design perspective, is you pick a couple of shapes and make sure that the aliens and all their hardware, their spaceships, their weapons, their whatever, all have similar shape language. So one other little note is when you're designing something that's really, really big, that's another reason to sometimes go with something that might be a little bit simpler. Because in general, I found that the larger something is, the simpler it tends to be. For example, if you think of the animal kingdom, if you have the pattern on a snake versus the pattern on an elephant, the snake has tons of little details in its patterning, and an elephant is basically just one solid color over the entire surface. Or think of a car versus a truck. A car might have lots of little details, but a truck ends up becoming sort of a big, simple box. Or think of the overall floor plan of your house versus the floor plan of, say, a giant warehouse. Again, the giant warehouse ends up becoming very simple and boxy. So when it came time to do the design, I started off doing a bunch of silhouettes. And these silhouettes are very straightforward. They were just done in Photoshop using the straight edge marquee tool, and then also the rectangle tool and the circle tool. And I started off up here, making these guys, which are basically just sort of big, simple monoliths. Again, I was trying to experiment as much as possible with triangles and ring shapes. So you'll see that over and over again in the designs. And then I started doing some of these guys down here, and once I did that one, I thought to myself, that's cool, but I've done a bunch that are kind of symmetrical. Let's do something more asymmetrical. So I took this one, cut it in half, and then glued it together, and I got that. And did some more ones over here. This one I felt looked a little too much like the recognizer from Tron, so I decided not to go for that one. Kind of like this one here. Again, this one really follows those simple design rules. If you had to explain what it is, it's a giant V. So this one was kind of cool. And in the end, I sort of like this Ankh-shaped one. But looking at it some more, I realized it kind of looked a little bit too much like a spaceship from Homeworld. I forget what the name of the alien race was. Now, Homeworld is a really, really cool video game, and it's okay to be inspired by it or anything else, but it looked just a little too similar. You don't want to do a direct copy. That's boring anyway. So this one sort of came from that, where I did add the big trench thing, but then I said, okay, well, how about though if I copy it so that it is symmetrical on, but not only left to right, but also up and down. And so that's when looking at all the designs, some of the other ones I might use for other projects, but this is the one that spoke to me the most for this particular project. So anyway, that's just a few of the thoughts I had when designing the alien mothership. And if you want to see a little bit more in terms of how I go about detailing these things, I have a tutorial on my website. If you go to neilblevins.com and go to the CG Education section, which discusses a ship kind of similar to this, and it starts off with a silhouette sketch and then shows how to detail it out like this. So if you're interested in that process, go check it out on my website. I have it up on Gumroad. But otherwise, hopefully you've enjoyed this little chat, and thank you very much for watching.